Genesis chapter 12. Genesis 12, verse 3. This is a famous verse in the Bible. Genesis 12:3. This is the original blessing on the Jewish people and on anyone who is their friend. And I'll show you how it passes down. Genesis 12, verse 3. God says, "And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." This is God talking to Abraham. He says, "I'll bless them that bless thee." So what he's expecting is multiples to be the blessers. Multiple people to bless Israel. Now, that's not been the case historically, but it will be future. The whole earth will bless Israel. All nations will come to Israel to bless them. But for us now, we can be part of that. If you'll bless Israel, you can be part of the friends of Israel who get a blessing. He says, "I'll bless them that bless you." Look at the rest of that. "And I'll curse him," singular, "that curseth thee." So the him is singular, as in there is one curser of Israel. So if you're part of the curse, someone cursing Israel, you're part of the singular group that's doing that. That's the Antichrist. There's one group that always goes after Israel, and those are followers of the devil. It's satanic to be anti-Semitic, and it all goes that direction. Look at all of the historical dictators. Look at Russia. Look at Germany. All the time, China, even Spain. They've all come out strong against Israel when they're joining forces with the devil. Okay, here's some verses on it. Genesis 25, verse 11. This blessing goes from Abraham to Isaac, not from Abraham to Ishmael.
Right, because he's not his loins.
Right. It's specific in who the descendants are that God considers the blessing to come through. So you don't get a blessing from blessing Ishmael. You do get a blessing from blessing Isaac. Genesis 25:11. "And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac. And Isaac dwelt by the well of Laharai." Then it goes to Jacob, the descendants, the line that God declares Jewish people. You know, there's no real reason to say one person is a Jew and one is a Gentile. One is one nation and one is the other, because they're all brothers. They all are from the same family. It's God who declares this one's a Jew and this one is something else. This one is this and this one is that. You have to have a Bible to figure that out. Bloodline doesn't do it. God's the one who determines it. It goes from Isaac to Jacob. Genesis 27:29. Genesis 27:29 says, "Let the people serve thee, and the nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren," as in brothers, "and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee." Okay? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Then it goes from there to the 12 tribes. Now it's gone to a whole family of brothers. But it didn't start out that way. It started out 1, 1, 1, and now 12. Genesis 48, verse 9. Genesis 48, verse 9. "And Joseph said unto his father, They be my sons, whom God hath given me in this place." He's talking about Ephraim and Manasseh. "And he said, Bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them." Okay? Verse 16. "And the angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named upon them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." Verse 20. "And he blessed them that day, saying, In thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh." Chapter 49, verse 25. Chapter 49, 25. "Even by the God of thy father, who shall help me, by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, and blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breast, and blessings of the womb. So that's the full blessing of life comes through that one nation, the 12 tribes. Here it is in Numbers chapter 6. Numbers 6, verse 23. Numbers 6:23. Speak unto Aaron and unto his sons, saying, On this wise shall ye bless the children of Israel, saying unto them, okay, this is all of the tribes, the Lord bless thee, as in all, the nation, and keep thee. The Lord make his face to shine upon thee, and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee, and give thee peace. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Okay, that's some of the blessing that you get into if you can be a friend to Israel. Deuteronomy 26. Deuteronomy 26, verse 19. And to make thee high above all nations. So there's one nation that God considers higher, more priority than any other nation, which he hath made in praise and in name and in honor. And that thou mightest be a holy people unto the Lord thy God, as he hath spoken. So God intends Israel to be something totally different than all the other nations. Deuteronomy 29:29. It's hard to stay focused in Genesis because Genesis is the key to the whole rest of the Bible. So when you start investigating a verse, and I'm just picking a verse or two out of each chapter, when you take a verse in Genesis and start exploring it, it opens up all the rest of the Bible. Deuteronomy 29:29 says, The secret things belong unto the Lord our God. That's Israel saying that, our God. But those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever. That is the Jews, that we may do all the words of this law. Okay, so there's one nation who got the blessings of God. God has promised that blessing for anybody who will be a blessing to them. And he says there are some secret things that belong to God. God's going to keep some secrets. He does. There's some things he's not revealed yet, and that will not be revealed until the last times. Until the tribulation, they'll be revealed. There's some things hidden we won't know about. But he does begin to reveal things. Here he says, but those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever. So there's a blessing God gave Israel. He didn't give anybody else. He gave them the ability to be the carekeeper of his word, the revealed word. That's right. In Psalms 33, verse 12. Psalms 33:12 said, Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Now he's talking about a specific nation. He's not just talking about any nation. And we'll see it in the rest of this verse. He said, Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Well, whose God was the Lord in the Old Testament? There was only one nation who had the Lord as their God. All the other nations had many gods, lowercase g. And the people whom he hath chosen for his own inheritance. It's only one nation, Israel. Deuteronomy 32:21. Deuteronomy 32:21. Now that nation can make him mad. And here's the problem with that nation. When you get, he says, to whom much is given, much is required. When you get a great opportunity for blessing above other people, you also get in position for punishment above other people.
Praise the Lord.
Deuteronomy 32:21. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. That's God saying, Israel, the people I chose and the people I blessed and gave them all of the goodies, they've made me mad. So God gets jealous. That's one of his names. He says, I'm a jealous God. That's who he is. Don't do anything to force him to act on jealousy. He says, I'm jealous.
We're getting rid of all the mirrors.
Right. He says, I'm going to provoke them to jealousy so they see what it feels like. They've made me jealous. Now I'm going to do it to them just so they can see what it's like. I'll provoke them to jealousy with those which are not a people. Now, what does he mean by not a people? How can people who are not a people make other people mad?
Not the chosen people.
Correct. They're not special. As far as he's concerned, they're not worthy of being a people.
Yeah, we rode the yellow bus.
Mm-hmm. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. So it's nations there, and we know that it's people. He's not saying they're not really people. They are real people. But as far as the priority list goes, they're way down on the bottom. They're a foolish nation. That verse is used again by Paul in Romans 10:19, just to make a note of it. All right, Genesis 12:3. Genesis 12:3. Let's get the second half of this verse. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So he said something there. He said that all families of the earth are going to be blessed from Israel. That's where all the families in this earth get blessed. Now that's a weird place to trace back all blessings from. But he says that's where it comes through. Look at Isaiah 42:6. I'm going to show you an interesting play on words.
Just one?
Yeah. Isaiah 42:6. Mm-hmm. Isaiah 42:6, he's talking to the nation of Israel. I, the Lord, have called thee in righteousness, and will hold thy hand. I will keep thee, and give thee for a covenant of the people, for a light of the Gentiles. Light. What's a light? A bulb. Brightness. However, it could be not heavy, as in light.
Depends on how it's spelled.
Light. Don't you spell it the same?
L-I-T-E. Light.
L-I-G-H-T. Mm-hmm.
Like,
Let's look at one more verse. Look at chapter 49, verse 6.
my own word says,
I knew this was an ambush.
49, verse 6.
the word says the Lord is the lamp under my feet and the light unto my path. So that's what came to me was the light.
I knew it was an ambush.
He said it was. Yeah. He did say it.
Yeah, just watch this, and then
46, 49.
you don't have to put both feet in. Isaiah 49:6.
Oh, come on. I volunteer.
Isaiah 49:6. And he said, It is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob, to restore the preserved of Israel. He said it's a light thing. Now you think that means it's not a heavy thing, it's light.
It's a
But maybe
light
not.
thing.
It's a bright thing.
Yeah.
It's light. Let's see if that's what it really means. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles. that thou mightest be my salvation unto the end of the earth. So Israel is a reflector of God. God is light, and in him is no variableness of darkness. So Israel is supposed to reflect that light. He said, you're going to be the light for all of these nations. And so because of that, that will be the blessing that comes through. Now, Israel as a nation has fallen down on the job. They don't understand anything about salvation right now. What they're doing is trying to put a dimmer on God's light. Matter of fact, go to 2 Corinthians.
Moses.
Yep, 2 Corinthians. And where is that? Chapter 3? Yes, chapter 3, verse 14. Chapter 3:14. 2 Corinthians 3:14. I'll back up to verse 13 to give you the context. And not as Moses, which put a veil over his face, that the children of Israel could not steadfastly look to the end of that which was abolished. But their minds were blinded, for unto this day remaineth the same veil, untaken away. Okay, well, there was a brightness that came from Moses when he came down from the mountain. And he said, the other people said, hey, put a veil on that thing. We can't handle how bright that is. So he's saying that same picture is here. Israel, when they read the law, they have a veil on their face blocking the light. They're doing just the opposite. They're putting the veil on them so the light doesn't reflect. That same veil untaken away in the reading of the Old Testament, which veil is done away in Christ. So the one thing that Israel, a Jew, has to recognize is Jesus Christ.
Isaiah 53.
When Hebrews 12:3 and Ephesians 4:23. As soon as they accept Jesus Christ, the veil is gone. And then they can go back to being the light God intended them to be. After the tribulation, he'll restore them, and they will be that light for all nations. Isaiah 60, verse 1. Isaiah 60, verse 1 to 5. Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. Who's he talking to? He's talking to a nation here. Verse 2. For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the people. But the Lord shall rise upon thee, and his glory shall be seen upon thee. God's going to restore the glory to Israel that he had intended, and we saw it all the way back in Genesis. Verse 3. The Gentiles shall come to thy light, the kings to the brightness of thy rising. Lift up thine eyes round about and see. All they gather themselves together, they come to thee. Thy son shall come from afar, and thy daughters shall be nursed at thy side. Then thou shalt see, and flow together, and thine heart shall fear and be enlarged, because the abundance of the sea shall be converted unto thee. That's one of those places you see water referred to as people, the abundance of the sea. Shall be converted unto thee. The forces of the Gentiles shall come unto thee. That's exactly what God intended to do through this special line coming down from Abraham. And that's what the Jewish people are supposed to be. They've not done it. God put them in timeout right now. They're in timeout. He's made them stick their nose in the corner, and he's turned the light down on low. And it's nap time for them. But one day, he's going to say, nap time's over. You've paid enough. I feel like I've been reimbursed for what you've made me jealous by. And now I'm going to say it's okay, we're all good. And when he does that, he said, I'm going to fix it. That's what's called a new covenant. He's going to give a new covenant to Israel. And when he does, he says, let's start from scratch. Let's start over from the beginning. This one's going to be new and improved. There's no way you can offend me. We're going to make it all better.
Wow.
And then they're going to be exactly what they should have been all the way back in the Old Testament. Romans 15, verse 8. Romans 15, verse 8 and 9. Now I say that Jesus Christ was a minister of the circumcision for the truth of God. Okay, so that tells you something. It tells you a bunch of things. It tells you that when Jesus Christ showed up, he wasn't preaching the gospel we preach today. Do we preach circumcision? No. We preach something totally different. That was Jewish. That was rules and regulations. And when Jesus showed up, that's what he was preaching. Because they had the opportunity to accept him as a nation and begin to be the light to the Gentiles. They rejected him, and so then something changed. Then he says, Israel's in timeout, and I'll go to anybody who wants to accept me. That's a new gospel that wasn't preached until after Israel rejected him. But when he showed up, he was giving Israel the opportunity to accept him. So he was preaching this. That's why he shows up and he says, you've heard it said of old time, thou shalt not, but I say thou shalt not even more. Okay, verse 8. Now I say that Jesus Christ was the minister of the circumcision for the truth of God, to confirm the promises made to the fathers, and that the Gentiles might glorify God for his mercy. As it is written, for this cause I will confess to thee among the Gentiles and sing thy name. That's what Israel's supposed to do. Israel's supposed to be missionaries to the rest of the world. That was their job. Their job was to go out and convert every Gentile nation, to give them the truth. We have the truth. They did. They had the oracles go out. They had direct, the actual originals from God. God gave it to them and says, now, go do something with it. And that's what their job was. They were to go out and convert the world. They didn't do it. They started bickering and complaining amongst each other. It's what Christians are doing nowadays. They come to church and it's all about nitpicking each other. When we've got the truth, our job is to go out and convert somebody else. It's not to nitpick each other. Although that's what our example has been, Israel. Let's not follow their example. They got put in time out. Genesis 12. Genesis 12, verse 10. I was thinking about this today. If we were behind the Iron Curtain, if we were in Russia 50 years ago when you could not be a Christian, and if you did, you went to a concentration camp. If we were in that day and age, and we had the opportunity to meet together in a little group like this as Christians, and somebody had a Bible, maybe a couple of us had smuggled a Bible, maybe a few pages. When we got together, it would be a whole different matter than the way Christians get together now. Christians get together now, and it's all about, hey, I live better than they do, and, look at me, I'm so spiritual. Look at what I know.
Don't forget the ball games.
That's right. Yeah.
Or what
Yeah.
you were being instead of what
Yeah.
you
Yep.
forgot.
Yep. Right. And it's not about me. It's suddenly about the group as a body when it's outlawed. Then it comes back into focus what it should have been to begin with. That day's probably coming faster than we want it to. And when it does, suddenly everybody's eyes will be open, the Christians. And they'll be like, man, look at what we wasted. We could have been strengthening each other and really learned something from each other had we done it the way God had intended. But that's the way he grows the church, is through persecution, and it's probably coming. Genesis 12, verse 10. And there was a famine in the land. That's what normally happens. Right after the promise of blessing, you get a testing. And there was a famine in the land, and Abraham went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. This wasn't just a normal famine. He said it was grievous. That's bad enough to be a famine, but now it's a grievous famine. So he says, I'm going somewhere where it ain't so bad. And that's what we all do. We think, okay, things are bad right here. I'm uncomfortable. We put a high priority on comfort. And we say, okay, if it's uncomfortable right now, then God's telling me I must need to go to Egypt. It must be right for me to join the world in some manner. That's what he's telling me. He's dried it up over here, so I must need to go do what they're doing. Egypt has never been good in the Bible.
That's right.
Now they will be good one day. In the millennium, in eternity. The first famine in the Bible, that's where we find it right here. And it's sent, right after a blessing, it's sent to test Abraham. He enters a panic mode. And then he does what most of us do. He makes a foolish move. He's influenced by panic. And if you begin to panic over something, the thing to probably do is just the opposite of what panic is telling you to do. Because the devil's using that in order to force you to do something. So rather than panic, just sit back and say, okay, God, what is the move or not move you want me to make? In 12 verse 7, God had just given him the land of Canaan. All of this land, and there's a bunch of land he gives him. It's basically 1,000 miles by 1,000 miles in a triangle shape from the Tigris and Euphrates over to Goshen, north to Mount Ararat. It's a humongous land grant. That's the nation of Israel. Not that little slip of land they've got right now. The nation God promised to Israel, the land he promised, is humongous. He had just given Abraham that land. And what happens? He says, hey, look, the spot I'm in is not good. I better go down to the one place that he hasn't given me. So the temptation is not to enjoy what God's already given you. The temptation is to find something that's just outside of the reach of what God's given him. He leaves the promised land for the illusion of security in Egypt. And then when he gets there, he finds more trouble. Genesis 13, verse 7. Genesis 13:7. Now, this is not to give you a definitive answer to all the stories in the Bible. I'm just giving you cliff notes to get you interested in it. And now you'll go back and read it or not. Something will pop out and get your interest, and you'll say, hey, I want to know more about that. And you'll go study it. Genesis 13, verse 7. And there was strife between the herdmen of Abraham's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite, I always want to call them Perizzites, dwelt in the land. Yeah. The Perizzites dwelt in the land. Now these Perizzites will pop up repeatedly. And these are giants. Giants pop up all the way through your Bible because we saw in Genesis 6 what they are. They're fallen angels mixing with the human race. That has happened in the past, still happening, and will happen in the future. These are giants. Genesis 15, verse 20. Genesis 15:20. And the Hittite and the Perizzite and the Rephaims. Those are giants. I don't have time to look them all up, but you can look them up. Those are all giants. Joshua chapter 11, verse 3. And to the Canaanite on the east and on the west, and to the Amorite and the Hittite and the Perizzite and the Jebusite and the mountains, to the Hivite under Hermon and the land of Mitzvah. Joshua 17:15. And Joshua answered them, If thou be a great people, then get thee up to the wood country, and cut down for thyself there in the land of the Perizzites of the giants, if Mount Ephraim be too narrow for thee. So there he's plainly told you the Perizzites are of the giants. So those are the things that Abraham is supposed to conquer. That's the land given him. But when he was given the land, it was still given to him full of problems. So a blessing of God is not always problem-free. It always comes with God's ability, but it's never problem-free because that's how he works. Look at Genesis 14. Genesis 14, verse 1. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar. Now we saw Shinar earlier. Arioch, king of Elazar. Chedorlaomer, king of Elam. And Tidal, king of nations. I always like this last king there. He's the king of nations, plural. And title, I know it's not spelled the same way, but when you own something, you get a title for it. So he was title, king of nations. Nice. He owned multiples, nice. So he had the title. Shinar, we talked about that earlier. Elam is Arabia. You find that in Isaiah 21:2. Elam is Arabia. Isaiah 21:2. A grievous vision is declared unto thee. The treacherous dealer dealeth treacherously. Well, that's what you'd expect. And the spoiler, guess what? He spoils. Go up, O Elam. Besiege, O Media. All the sighing thereof have I made to cease. Singing thereof sighing have I made to cease. Jeremiah 25, verse 24. Jeremiah 25:24. You can put down in your notes 24 to 29. I'm just going to give you two verses so you see why I say Elam is Arabia. And all the kings of Arabia, and all the kings of the mingled people that dwell in the desert, the king of Zimri, and all the kings of Elam. Okay, 25, verse 24 and 25 tell you Elam is in Arabia. In Daniel 8, verse 2. Daniel 8, verse 2. Babylon reaches into Arabia. Babylon is a great conquering nation at the time Daniel is there. And they're trying to do what many of the conquerors have tried to do, and that is conquer the whole world. They want to rule it all. So they're reaching out as far as they can get. In Daniel 8, verse 2. I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw, that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in my vision, and I was by the river Eula. Okay, so that's Arabia. Genesis 14:4. Genesis 14:4. Now we know what 13 is. There's some other numbers in here I've not necessarily nailed down, but there's something to it, and I don't know what it is. Genesis 14. Why do we find this in chapter 14? I don't know. And why verse 4 instead of verse 13? I don't know. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. So 13 is rebellion. the context of 13 is rebellion. And you'll find the 13s are just nearly innumerable, the times they show up in the Bible, and it stands for something rebellious. Genesis 14, verse 13. 14:13. Maybe they're supposed to go on to 14 and they've rebelled and they're stuck on 13. That's why he puts 14 and 13 together. I don't know. Genesis 14:13. And there came one that had escaped and told Abram, the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abram. Abram, not Abraham. He hadn't changed his name yet. Confederate, that means they've joined forces. Now, confederate is not always bad. If you join forces with God, that's a confederacy. And that's a good one. But 99% of the time in the Bible, a confederacy is rebellion. And it's wicked. In Psalms 83, verse 5. Psalms 83, verse 5. It's hard for a southern boy to say confederacy is usually bad, but for they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. Don't join that party. Proverbs 11:21. Proverbs 11:21. You know how many stars are on a Confederate flag, don't you? 13. Proverbs 11:21. Though hand joined in hand, the wicked shall not be unpunished, but the seed of the righteous shall be delivered. Okay, so get in the right confederacy. The seed of the righteous will be delivered. Okay, join that group. That's a good army.
Amen.
Isaiah 7, verse 2. Isaiah 7, verse 2. Now let's notice the wording of this carefully. And I was told, the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim, and his heart was moved, and the heart of his people, as the trees of the woods are moved with the wind. It's Isaiah 7:2. He says, Syria is confederate with Ephraim, not the other way around. It's not Ephraim who joined Syria. It's Syria who joined Ephraim. It's the world wanting to get in.
Well, blessed be the name.
Her-
That's the best way to.
Her earphone must have popped out. Praise and worship music. Okay, so Syria is confederate with Ephraim. The world joined the church. The world joined God's people. Syria. It shouldn't have been that way. Syria shouldn't have wanted to have anything to do with the church. Why would they want to have anything the church has? It should be the church influencing them. The way you do that is first you offend them. Jesus said, all men will be offended in me. So I have one question for every religion, every denomination. Tell me, how has your message, whatever your dogma is that you've learned, how did that offend you? Unless you've been first offended, you've not been changed. You've got to see something about me was wrong that needed to change. Not that conforms to what I want to be. Something about me was offended and I realized, hey, I'm bad. That's right. So that's the main question. What offended you? And let's talk about that and let's see if that's worthy. Jesus said all men will be offended in me. He says, I'm going to be a rock of stumbling, a stone of offense. That's Jesus Christ calling himself. Okay, I don't know how we got off on that. Isaiah 8, verse 9. This is God seeing their plans, these nations' plans. And he says, hey, I tell you what, let me give you a battle plan. I'm going to help you with your plan. I hate that when you have to help somebody argue against you. I've done that before. I remember somebody upset that I went to the school I went to, that I was going to take a group of people and turn them into something they didn't like. And they said I was a Ruckmanite. And I said, okay, well, they said, do you believe everything Ruckman? I said, I don't know, probably 90% of it, but tell me what you don't agree with. They said, well, they don't know at that point. It's just a line they've heard. I said, well, okay, let me tell you a few things that you wouldn't like. I said, I give him the argument he's supposed to be giving me. Let me argue with you by arguing with me. That's what God's doing here. Associate yourselves, O you people, and ye shall be broken in pieces. And give ear, all ye far countries. Gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces. Gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces. Tell you what, all of you get together, and then when that falls apart, get back together. When that falls apart, get back together. Get some more people. It's not going to work. Don't join forces with the wrong force. In Isaiah 54, verse 15. Isaiah 54, verse 15. The big crowd is usually wrong, because that's their comfort. Their comfort is there's a bunch of us, so we can't all be wrong. Well, you probably are. Isaiah 54, 15. Behold, they shall gather together, but not by me. Whosoever shall gather together against thee shall fall for thy sake. In the end, all of the nations are going to gather together against God and against Israel. It's going to be, if we're going to do the math, it's going to be all of them must be right because there's so many of them, and Israel's this little bitty tiny nation. And only a handful of Israel is against the other nations in the tribulation. It's just a remnant of Israel. So they must be wrong if we're doing the math. God says, I got a higher math than you. It's the lower percentage that's right. The rest of you are wrong. Zechariah 14, verse 1. Zechariah 14, 1.
It only takes a small wick to set off the diamond.
Isaiah 14, 1.
Did you say Zechariah or Isaiah?
Yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
Zechariah 14, 1. Start in Isaiah, and if you read fast, you'll catch up to me. Zechariah 14, 1 to 3. Behold, the day of the Lord. Okay, what's the day of the Lord? Second Advent. Cometh, and they spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations. This is God talking. Against Jerusalem to battle. God says, look, they've got a plan they want to get together. And they don't even know how to do it. So I'm going to help them out. I'm going to help them gather together. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. And the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fought in the day of battle. Let me show you something real quick. That's hidden in the notes for you. Revelation 17. Revelation 17, verse 16. I really got to hurry because we got a lot to cover. Can't be running all these rabbit trails. Revelation 17, 16. This is the way God works. He takes, you remember Pharaoh. Pharaoh hardened his heart. He kept hardening his heart. And then God started hardening his heart. So God just gives you the desire of your heart. If you have wicked desires, God will help you fulfill them. At some point, he'll help you fulfill them. If your desire is to do righteousness, He'll help you fulfill that desire.
Praise the Lord.
Yes,
Yeah, he answers according to what's in your heart.
that's right. Here is the tribulation. Revelation 17, verse 16. The 10 horns that thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, talking about the Antichrist, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will. So, that's what he's talking about when he says, I'll gather the nations together. Okay, I'll just put it in there. They don't know how to do it. I'm going to give them the desire. They want to do it, they just don't know how. So I'm going to help them.
It's like Jesus suffering right there. He had to help them. None of the witnesses could come together.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, look, after they was sitting there with the Father, and then they were like, oh yeah, well, now we heard their side.
Yep.
Otherwise, they'd still be there arguing, trying to figure out.
Genesis 14:14. Genesis 14:14. And so that we've gotten this this rebellion, this confederacy. This is the first world war in your Bible. It's all these nations joined together and these other nations, and they fight against each other. In the midst of this fight is somebody who gets captured, is Lot. So Abraham's going to go down there and pull him out of the fire. Genesis 14:14. And when Abraham heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. So he armed these men. There's a lot to say about this verse. Let's just look at him arming them. He armed them. Luke 11, verse 21. The Bible does not support a pacifistic mindset. God intends you to protect your own. He intends you to take force to protect what is yours. What he's given you, he intends you to protect. Luke 11:21. And when a strong man armed keepeth his palace, his goods are in peace. So, if you want to keep your palace safe and your goods safe, get you some arms. Get something that you can protect it with. That's Jesus saying that, not me. Argue with him. Luke 22:36. Luke 22:36. This is Jesus again. Then said he unto them, But now, he that hath a purse, well, no man should have a purse anyway, let him take it, and likewise his scrip, and he that hath no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. So there's something more important than fancy duds. He says, if you don't have a sword, you better take some of your, get in that closet over there and look through that. Some of that junk you don't have to have. Sell that and go get you a sword. Now, I know everybody wants to spiritualize that. He's not talking spiritually. He's talking physically, a sword. How do you know that? Verse 38. And they said, Lord, behold, here are 2 swords. And he said unto them, It is enough.
So 2 swords.
2. In the group.
Back up.
His and
One
hers.
preaching.
That's right. 2 swords. So Abraham was ready. He said, I've got servants in this house, and I've got enough swords for all of them. Because one day we may have to protect this place. So I'm going to be sure they're trained, and I'm going to be sure they all have something to fight with. Now, we can spiritualize that, but you can take it physical. Physically, you should be able to defend yourself and your junk that God's given you. God intends you to. Your junk. Yep. That's right.
No. He said servants.
That's everybody in my house is my servant.
Right. They need to.
That's news to
I
them.
just need to get them a sword.
Right.
Okay, that's what okay, good. Okay, good.
Okay, so let's move on. before I get in trouble. Genesis 14:14. Genesis 14:14. He armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318. That's a big army. 318? That's how many servants he had.
How many horses I have in the hood?
Yeah, that's a lot. However, it wasn't just a drop in the bucket compared to what he's going against. 5 nations against 5 nations.
Yeah, but
You're talking about 10 armies. 318 men are going against.
seals.
Mm-hmm. Judges chapter 7. Judges chapter 7 verse 7. God likes to work on this kind of math, reverse math. 318 is going up against 10 nations of armies. And here in Judges 7:7 we find something else. And the Lord said unto Gideon, by 300 men that lack will I save you, and deliver the Midianites into thine hand. And let all other people go, even every man into his place. Look at chapter 8, verse 10. Judges 8, verse 10. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Kirkor, and their host with them about 15,000 men. How would you like to face those odds? 300 on 15,000? All that were left of the host of the children of the east. And there fell 120,000 men that drew swords. That's a whole lot of killing.
They were busy.
Yeah. And pursued them unto Dan. Deuteronomy 34, verse 1. Deuteronomy 34:1. He said, when we went after these guys, I took 318 of my guys, and we went after these people, and we just kept cutting and hacking people up. And we started, and we didn't stop until we got to Dan. Now that's typically the border of Israel. From Dan to Beersheba. That's the... If you go to Israel today and ask them what's their most northern and most southern city, they'll say Dan to Beersheba. In the Balfour Declaration, when they were trying to figure out what should we set the territory as for Israel, they said Dan to Beersheba. But the problem is, where is Dan? They didn't know. There's 2 Dans. That's about 150 miles is how far they chased these guys on foot. That's some serious... This is on foot. Or horse or camel or whatever they're using. Deuteronomy 34 verse 1. And Moses went up from the plains of Moab unto the mount of Nebo, to the top of Pisgah that is over against Jericho, and the Lord showed him all of the land of Gilead unto Dan. That's the northern region. God says, hey look, this is how much you're getting. Remember, he's showing them before they cross the Jordan there. So that's the southern region, that's South Israel. And he's got him up on a mountain high enough he can see the most northern tip of it, Dan. So he's giving him that long view. Judges 18, verse 29. You'll find it from time to time when you're reading through your Bible. You'll find another name for it. Judges 18:29. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their father, who was born unto Israel. Howbeit, the name of the city was Laish at first. So if you come across that city in your Bible, Laish, you know it's talking about Dan. I like the way the Bible defines itself. It'll tell you when something changes, and it'll tell you as it changes, so that you begin to develop the vocabulary to understand what it's talking about. Genesis 15, verse 5. Genesis 15, verse 5. This is God promising to multiply the descendants of Abraham. Genesis 15:5. And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now toward the heaven, and tell the stars if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. He said, Tell the stars if you be able to number them. So is he going to tell off the stars? No, this is a phrase. This is Old English. Tell means to count. Tell the stars if you can number them. Tell them. So we say you have a bank teller. They are in the till. It's all a derivative of the same root word, tell, to count. Now you'll find that throughout the Bible, you'll find tell, and you'll need to understand what it's talking about. It's talking about counting. Something that has to do with numbers. You'll find something called a tale of bricks. It's that same derivative, tale. It's something that needs to be counted. It's a specific number.
What about a title tale?
Yes, that one needs to take account. Genesis 15, verse 18. Genesis 15, 18. Genesis 15, 18. In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. Okay, so that's the southern border. That's all the way from the Tigris and Euphrates to the great river. That would be the Nile in Egypt. And you see that Goshen is part of that territory. In fact, Solomon claims that territory under his rule, Goshen. That's the city, or that's the territory that was originally given to Israel when they were in Egypt. Pharaoh said, I'll give you Goshen. Now, there arose another Pharaoh that didn't know God and said, hey, that's my treasure city. I'm just letting y'all build it. You can live there, but it's mine. Well, God said, no, I don't think so. And they came back through and they got it, and it will be theirs again. So the real estate that God's given to Israel is a big territory. They've never had all of it. They never will have it all until God gives it to them when he shows up, and he will. God's very interested in land and boundaries. He says, don't remove the old landmarks because they're there for a reason. He says, I've set up and I've instituted certain portions of land for certain people. Don't be messing with that. That's what I decided. So God's interested in land. Most of the time in your Bible, you'll find land in some reference to Israel, because there's one spot on this globe that God is keenly aware of, and that's the land of Israel. That's his. Genesis 15, verse 18. Genesis 15, 18. In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. Now look at something. The Kenites and the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Raphaims, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Okay, who are all of these ites? Well, some of them are and some of them aren't. But they're enemies. They're occupying the land God has given to Abraham. They're the occupiers. They're the original occupiers. So they're not descendants of Abraham, are they? Correct. They're Gentiles. Look at verse 19. What is the second identifier there? Kenizzites. Correct. Okay. So recognize that, because you're going to find somebody famous who's a Kenizzite. Numbers chapter 13. Numbers 13, verse 6. These are when they're picking out the spies to go spy out Canaan. 12 spies. Of the tribe of Judah, Caleb the son of Jephunneh. Okay, well, that doesn't mean anything. Good. Glad you didn't think it meant anything. Joshua 14:14. Joshua 14:14. Hebron, therefore, became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, unto this day, because that he wholly followed the Lord God of Israel. So Caleb was a descendant of one of these Gentile people. And he converted to Israel. And somebody in Israel was doing what Israel was intended to do. Adopt him in. They adopted him in. Now, if he could have been adopted by any tribe, he got the best one. Judah. The Lion of the tribe of Judah. The scepter will not depart from Judah. That's Jesus Christ's line right there. A Gentile got in. Well, guess what? I'm a Gentile and I got in too. Genesis 16, verse 12. Genesis 16:12. I think this is our last verse. Genesis 16:12. This is going to be Ishmael. Genesis 16:12. And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Okay, so Abraham produced this seed that he should not have. And it's going to cause problems. Anytime we try to help God out, we ain't helping it. We ain't helping him out. We ain't helping ourselves out.
That's right.
It just produced war from now to the end of time. The descendants of Ishmael are said to be wild, and they are. Not reasonable. So it doesn't do you any good to have peace talks with the Middle East. They're not a peaceful people. They're wild. If they're not fighting you, they're fighting each other. Look at the Sunni and the Shia. Shiite. No. There's about 12 different groups of Muslims, like denominations. And they all fight each other. If they're not fighting each other, they'll join forces and fight you. But as soon as they've conquered you, they're back to fighting each other. Always have been. We know some Muslims in town. There's the guy that runs Fanaris Brothers. His family is from Iran.
It's a Greek restaurant.
But he's not.
He's not.
No. He's from Iran. And so I asked him about it one day. And he said it's he started explaining to me the differences. But those two denominations are the famous ones, and they hate each other. Iran and Iraq. They hate each other because they both are a different belief system, but both Muslim. And they'll kill each other over it. That's because they're a wild man. God's already prophesied it. They're just wild. The word wild here, there's a phrase in the Bible that pictures this. It's called a wild ass, meaning a donkey. And we'll find that in Job. That's the best description of the wandering, lawless, freeboating life of the Bedouin and Arab, the descendants of Ishmael. Genesis 21:20. Genesis 21:20. And God was with the lad, this is Ishmael, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. The wilderness. That's rough living. Now, some of the roughness of these Arabs is because they've had a rough bringing up. That's where they lived. That'd make you rough. That'd make you tough. But let's keep learning about Job chapter 11, verse 12. Job 11:12. Job 11:12. For vain man, God's got a high opinion of humans. For vain man would be wise. That is, he wants to be smart. Though he be born like a wild ass's colt. That's the way you're born. That's your natural inclination, is not wisdom. It's just the opposite of wisdom. And by nature, you're just wild. You want everything that pleases you and nothing that makes you uncomfortable. That's just wild. That's a wild ass's colt. The donkey wants everything it wants, and it don't care anything about what you want. You're not riding me. You're not telling me I got to go over there. Job 39, verse 5. Job 39:5. Who hath sent out the wild ass free? Or who hath loosed the bands of the wild ass? Whose house I have made the wilderness. Remember, that's where they dwelled. And the barren land his dwellings. That's exactly what the Arabs live in. A dry desert wilderness. Verse 7. He scorneth the multitude of the cities, neither regardeth the cry of the driver. That sounds like some Pensacola drivers. The ranging of the mountain is his pasture. Now, just because it says mountain, that doesn't mean that it's a beautiful mountain. You can have mountains in the desert. Just pure sand piled sky high. He searcheth after every green thing. That's what the Muslims have been promised to be as a descendant. Now, this sounds really racist, doesn't it? It sounds like I'm getting down on one nation. And it sounds like God is. It sounds like God has doomed one set of individuals. But we've seen before, God always gives the individual an option. It's the individual who gets a choice. God is no respecter of persons. He'll choose anybody. However, as a group, he's saying the majority of them are going to do this. This is what their predisposition will be. However, any individual who wants to reach out to me, I'm there for them. And he can change them. Look at Genesis 49, verse 10. Genesis 49:10. It says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, till Shiloh come. And to him shall the gathering of the people be, binding his foal unto the vine, and his ass's colt unto the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine, his clothes in the blood of the grapes. Okay, there's one day that these descendants who are wild and rebels against God are going to be conquered. They're either going to join the right vine, the choice vine, and be tied, as in not rebellious, or they're going to be part of the blood. And we'll see it in the Bible. The only hope for a wild ass's colt is to be redeemed. In the Bible, I'll show this to you. Exodus 13:13. Of course, the numbers there tell us something. Exodus 13:13. And every firstling of an ass thou shalt redeem with a lamb. And if thou wilt not redeem it, then thou shalt break his neck. And all the firstborn of man among the children shalt thou redeem. No option to break their neck. But a wild ass, they've been given something specific. You don't find them talking about breaking anybody else's neck. Because this thing by birth is rebellious. Just like man. Man is born rebellious. So, you either redeem it with a lamb. I got redeemed with the lamb. or you get your neck broke. That's the blood we found out about. John chapter 12. John 12, verse 13. There's hope for a wild man. John the Baptist would have been considered a wild man, but he was in submission to the right person. John 12, verse 13. This is Palm Sunday here. Took branches of palm trees and went forth to meet him and cried, Hosanna! Blessed is the King of Israel. King of Israel. What's that remind you of? Millennium. That cometh in the name of the Lord. And Jesus, when he had found a young ass, sat thereon, as it is written, Fear not, daughters of Zion, behold, thy King cometh, sitting on an ass's colt. Okay, Jesus Christ can conquer and tame the wild. Ishmael can be tamed if he'll submit to Jesus Christ, and he will become a good thing. Or else, if he wants to rebel, gotta break his neck. Now let's watch him break his neck. 2 Kings 9. Second Kings 9:33. This is Jezebel. This is how she meets her end. Jehu comes down and they have a throwdown, literally. 2 Kings 9:33. This is Jehu talking. And he said, Throw her down, Jezebel. So they threw her down, and some of her blood was sprinkled on the wall and on the horses, and he trod her underfoot. Now, in and of itself, that doesn't mean a whole lot other than the wicked woman got what she deserved. However, that becomes a picture of something that travels throughout the Bible. Blood sprinkling on the horses. Blood is something that deserved to be shed because she shed innocent blood. Her blood needs to be shed. Isaiah 34, verse 2. Isaiah 34:2. This is all just pure Bible. People miss all these sections for some reason. Joel Osteen doesn't have them in his, I guess. Isaiah 34:2. For the indignation of the Lord is upon all nations, and his fury upon all their armies. He hath utterly destroyed them. He hath delivered them to the slaughter. Their slain also shall be cast out. Their stink shall come up out of their carcasses, and the mountains shall be melted with their blood. Whew. And all the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all the host shall fall down as the leaf falleth off from the vine, and as the falling fig from the fig tree. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven. Behold, it shall come down upon Idumea. Idumea, you may know where that is? That is, you've got the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River that comes down and empties into the Red Sea. It would be southeast of there is Idumea, and that is Arabia. All of that, Iran, Iraq, all of that heading east toward the Tigris and Euphrates. Idumea, and upon the people of my curse to judgment. Those are some happy go to sleep verses. Isaiah 63 verse 1. Isaiah 63 verse 1. The obvious answer, he's going to give a question here. The obvious answer to all these questions is God. Who is it that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Bozrah? Where's Basra? We've been doing war with them. Basra. It's in Iraq. This that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength. I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Wherefore art thou red in thine apparel, and thy garments like him that treadeth the wine fat? I have trodden the winepress alone, didn't need any help. And of the people there was none with me, for I will tread them in mine anger, and trample them in my fury. And their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. For the day of vengeance is in mine heart, and the year of my redeemed is come. And I looked, and there was none to help, and I wondered that there was none to uphold. Therefore mine own arm brought salvation unto me, and my fury it upheld me. Whew. This is a view of God people don't have. And I will tread down the people in mine anger, and make them drunk in my fury. I will bring down their strength to the earth. If you read a little more of that and get that viewpoint of God, then you understand why he says fear God. Okay, he's somebody to be feared. He's not only capable of doing this, he's prophesied one day I'm going to. Revelation 14. Revelation 14:20. Revelation 14:20. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and the blood came out, and the winepress even unto the horse's bridle. That's how high up it came, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. The big pool of blood. Revelation 19:11. And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. He would choose white because red will show up bright on it. And he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he doth judge and make war. Well, maybe he's just talking about somebody who's really righteous and, tells the truth all the time. Let's find out. Verse 13. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name was called the Word of God. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. One day Jesus Christ is coming back, and that's the way he's going to show back up. That's called the day of the Lord in the Bible. The day of the Lord is the day of vengeance. We're going out before that day happens. If you're saved now, you'll come back as a spectator with him. He'll do all the work on his own. He doesn't need any help. But we'll be there to cheer him on. He'll have 2 armies of cheerleaders following him. And that'll be us. Okay, that's enough for tonight. We'll pick up somewhere next week.
Genesis 17:1.